Hi everyone, welcome to this next video in our security training series. This one's level 2, seed phrase protection, and this is really just going to run over the basics of how you should be storing your seed phrases just to protect them for the longer term so that you don't lose your funds. So let's jump straight into it. Alright, so what we've got up on screen here is what I call the security spectrum, and it's a bit of a range where we're looking at what's the minimum we should be doing to protect our seed phrases and what are we protecting against, all the way up to let's get extreme, let's protect against everything we can and make sure our funds are as safe as possible and we're protecting against as many types of failures or attacks as possible. So let's just have a quick look at the security spectrum, and what we're looking at is depending on the amount of funds you are protecting. So down here we've got a small amount, and as those funds increase in size, we are going to need to make sure that we employ more rigorous actions and procedures to ensure our funds are protected. So when you're dealing with a smaller amount of funds, $100 or so, you can be a little bit more flippant with how you're storing them, because let's face it, if something happened and they got hacked or lost or stolen, it's not a great deal of money. However, on the flip side, when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars and more, then you need to be pretty hot on how you set up your security environment and how you protect your seed phrases. And you can see, so we've got our spectrum runs along, okay, how much are you trying to protect against, but also what are you trying to protect against. And we go from the very basic, which is protecting against your silly own self and making sure you don't do anything stupid like just forget things, forget passwords, forget seed phrases, which is that's an internal threat, I guess. That's making sure you're doing the right things. And then as we start to look further afield at external threats, right up to, if you're getting silly, how far do you take it? So you can go too far. So do we have to protect against a meteor hitting the Earth or against an alien invasion? Well, probably not. But we do need to protect against this spectrum of increasing levels of threat. And the methods we use to protect against these threats increases as the threat increases and as the size of the asset you're trying to protect increases. So it's a bit of a sliding scale, a bit of like we call a spectrum. So what we're going to focus on in today's session is just having a look at, okay, how do we do the basic things we need to protect our seed phrases just from these typical attacks that could occur. Okay. So let's have a look at our first thing we should be protecting against, and that is protecting against yourself. So what kind of things can we do to protect against ourself? So first and foremost, if this is just basic 101, if you've got a seed phrase, write it down on a piece of paper. That's bare minimum. If you're not recording your 12 words or your 24 words, if you're not recording that seed phrase, that is a recipe for disaster. And when we record it, be very succinct in how you record it. So write down the word, the order of the word. So number 1, dog. Number 2, cat. So put them down in order as they appear, because if you get those out of order, or you write them in 2 columns and you've got the columns ordered the wrong way, you're not going to be able to restore your wallet successfully. So make sure that you're writing them down as they appear, all lowercase, in order. Okay, that's bare minimum number 1. Then you're going to take a copy of that, because if you write it down and put it on a piece of paper, that's great, you've done the bare minimum. But if you lose that piece of paper, so remember we're protecting from our own silly self, So write it down again. Have more than one copy of your seed phrase, because if something happens to that one copy and you need it, you're never going to get that back unless you have a duplicate copy somewhere. Now, that's great. We've written it down on a piece of paper. Can we do just a little bit more to protect that a little bit more? Yep, maybe we could laminate it. So if you can laminate that safely, and I don't mean taking it down to Officeworks or somewhere like that and giving it to one of the customer reps there and saying, can you just laminate this for me? If you can laminate it at home or do something along those lines where you're not giving away your seed phrase to a third party you don't know or trust, then do that as a minimum. At least you've got it. It's a bit more protected than a bit of paper. If a bit of water damage gets on it, then it may survive that as well. So let's start thinking about a few things like that. Another good thing, very cheap and affordable these are to buy, and that's tamper-proof envelopes. So like something you would use to send post in the mail, where you can put the seed phrase into this envelope, seal it up. That way you know if someone has tampered with it, you're aware of it at least. So you know that envelope's been tampered with. Possibly someone you don't trust has viewed those seed words, then maybe you can do something about that. Okay, so it's not a brilliant high security solution, but at least it is doing the bare minimum just to protect your seed phrase and making sure that silly things aren't happening to it. It's like locks on a door. They're there to protect honest people. If someone really wants to break into your car or your house, they'll smash a window and get in, let's face it. So we're just doing the bare minimum to keep prying eyes away from this sensitive information. Once you've done that, if you can, secure it somewhere safe. So if you've got a safe at home, that is an awesome place to put it. If not, find somewhere safe and secure that's out away from prying eyes. So do the best you can to make sure that this seed phrase just doesn't inadvertently end up in someone else's hands. I'm going to jump down to the don'ts, because I want to come back to the last point. So don't ever store this on a device that is connected to the internet. So your computer, your phone, anything like that, if you're popping it in a note or Word document or something like that, or even in LastPass or KeyPass or a password manager, if this is your primary hardware device's seed, where it's going to store significant amount of funds, never ever put it online. Okay? Now, let's jump back up to my final point. It is okay to put it on an air-gapped phone or computer. So what does an air-gapped phone or computer look like? It is a computer that has literally had network cards, Wi-Fi cards, any way of connecting to the internet. It's been removed, disabled, can't be enabled. Same with phones. If you've got a way of a phone being totally disabled so it's not going to get on the internet, that's an okay place to store something. I guess it's the equivalent of a USB key, as long as that USB key never goes on anything that can touch the internet. So you might put a USB key in a air-gapped machine and manually type in the passphrase on a note file on that USB key, and then pull that out. So that has never ever once touched the internet. If you're going to do that, you need to be red hot on the fact that device, wherever you've plugged that USB key in, or the air-gapped device you're using, you need to be absolute 100%. This never has or never will touch the internet or a network, a local area network of any kind, Wi-Fi network of any kind. Right? It has to be totally air-gapped, totally separate. Obvious things. Don't leave it out in the open in a desk drawer or anything like that. Now, I think that goes without saying. If it falls into the wrong hands, or someone you thought you could trust picks that up, that's not a good result if they've got your seed phrase, because they then have total control of any funds that are linked to that seed phrase. And don't put too much information on the piece of paper. Like if you just write down 12 words and you put enough so that you know what it relates to, or in the case if something bad happens to you, enough information so that the people that follow you know how to access the funds, that's great. But don't go writing down, okay, I've got this much money and it's on this device where I keep in my left back pocket, and this is the PIN code to the device. So put down just what you need to be able to identify what that is for, so that should you need to restore it, you can. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the dead basics you should be doing with your seed phrase, and that is really protecting against your own dumb self. So primarily from loss or forgetting of your seed phrase. All right, moving right along. Okay, so this one's a little bit more of a sinister threat and an external threat. So it's not about just protecting against your own silly self now. We've got other parties we need to protect ourselves against. And primarily this is others online. So this is just good security hygiene for when you're using your computer. So you should always have firewalls enabled at all times. So if you're sitting on an unprotected device, especially if you're doing things in like cafes where they've got open Wi-Fi networks. So by their very nature, open means that if you're attached to that Wi-Fi network, then you can see all the other devices on that Wi-Fi network. And if those devices don't have their firewalls up, they're exposed. Hopefully, if you're operating from your home or your office, you've got gateway devices that deploy all these firewall features. As I mentioned before, never ever put your private keys online on your computer. That's number one priority. And where we see a lot of people get caught out is on these next 2 points. So never ever enter your private keys or seeds into any website, chats, anything like that. So that can happen in a couple of different ways. So you might be looking at storing a particular cryptocurrency, and it might be not one of your standard ones like your Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's a little bit left field, and you're not sure what wallet you should be using, and you start searching online and you find a wallet you can use, and this wallet says, oh, you need to enter in your private key. Okay, instantly red flag. Like if you're entering your hardware, in particular your hardware device's private key anywhere, that is a massive red flag. Okay, you should never ever be giving that out. It's contained on the hardware device itself. That security information never has to leave that hardware device. Any wallet or website that you're going to hook into, speak to your hardware device, will never ever ask you to put in your private keys if it's a legitimate bit of software. Okay, likewise, if you're in chats and someone's offering to, in inverted commas, help you, which happens quite a lot. There's a lot of scammers in places like Telegram and things like that, where they'll start with what seems like a pretty friendly conversation, which quickly turns to them trying to request either you to send them Ethereum or Bitcoin, or asking for private keys. So just use common sense. Don't ever, you should never ever give out your private keys to anyone. In terms of setting up wallets, if you are, and this is probably less so with hardware wallets, but can happen. So let's just say you've purchased a hardware wallet from eBay, something like that, and it comes with a set of instructions that says go to this website and generate your private key or your seed phrase. So you go to the website, you click on this generate your seed phrase. It gives you a seed phrase, and then you essentially do a restore on your Ledger wallet or your Trezor, and you input that seed phrase thinking you've done the right thing. You've gone to a legitimate website, you've generated this seed phrase, you've put it into the device like they told you to, and everything seems pretty kosher until 6 months later when you've loaded up all these funds on your device. Instantly they disappear. And sounds a bit silly, but this has happened en masse to numerous people where they've participated in projects. It's a new and exciting project. Wallet software is still quite new. In inverted commas, a community member puts up a website to help everyone out. They generate all their seed phrases, and then all their funds got stolen in one hit over the course of a couple of days. So that really happened, and that was in, I think, 2017, 2018. So this does happen. So be very, very careful. Unless you really know what you're doing and there's a specific reason you're doing it, you should never ever be generating seeds online unless you're a technical type person and you know you're doing it for a reason. But definitely for your hardware wallets, never ever. If you can, use a VPN. That's becoming quite prevalent now, where it's just another little layer of protection where you're just snooping people away from the sites you're visiting. So when you interact with your Trezor, or you're using MetaMask or anything like that, it's just another layer of security where people can't see your IP address that you're coming from when you're interacting with applications online that are to do with the crypto space. And like I've said before, always secure your seed somewhere safe, and always use hardened or air-gapped computers if possible. So I think we've pretty much covered the air-gap side of things. Hardened, that's a very specific term, and that is about tightening up the security on your machine. So if you want to make your environment, your security environment a lot more secure, you can, like I said, switch on all your firewalls, you can switch on all your antivirus, and you can really ramp all the settings up on them so they only explicitly allow certain interactions to go in or out, and that we call that hardening, where we switch off all the other services you don't need on your computer, so you're just running the bare minimum things you need to get the computer to operate correctly and do what you need it to do. You're not installing all different types of software. You're not leaving all the default settings wide open, because that's easy. You're not operating as logged in as administrator all the time. So you're tightening up the security environment on the computer and locking down all the services and applications, so it does just what you need it to do to work in the crypto space. 99% of attacks where someone's computer has been compromised is through user error. Computers these days, so if you just have a look at a typical setup, you've got your gateway device, which is a firewall. You've got, in most cases, a Windows or a Mac, which has got firewalling type features on it, and also antivirus type features on it. So for someone to craft an exploit that can penetrate all of those things and get into your computer is very difficult to do. However, the way people get around that is they do the old simple thing of sending someone an email with a curious title, and inevitably, humans being humans, out of curiosity, click on an attachment or a link, and that instantly then installs a bit of software and gives someone access to your computer. And that's where a lot of these ransomware type attacks occur. So one, you've got to be on a computer that's not up to date with the antivirus and all the other side of things, but then you've also got to do something stupid like clicking on a suspicious link. Okay, so if you don't know the person who's sending you an email, or you're not expecting it, and it's got attachments, or the old one is here's your order and your invoice, like, just don't ever click on those. If it's important, they'll resend it again. Just delete the email. If it's that important, someone will let you know and resend it. But yeah, just be be very mindful of those, what we call a social engineering type attacks, where they're really preying on human behaviours to take advantage of you. And yeah, look, when you're online, just don't talk about what you own or how much you've got. The amount of guys I see that do that online makes me cringe every time. It just makes them a massive target. Like, why would you want to tell anyone how much you own or what you're doing? You don't walk around blabbing that to everyone in the street, how much money you've got in the bank. Why would you do it online? It's no different. So just keep those sorts of behaviours in mind. Don't ever give out more than what you need to. Okay, let's move on to the next part. I think we've covered that quite well in terms of online protection. So let's move up our spectrum again. We've protected against ourselves. We've protected against attacks online. Now let's have a look at it's probably less common in this space, but could actually become more common as people get more savvy about what a hardware device is and seed phrases and things like that. And that is really, it's theft, so physical theft. So what can we do to protect against these sorts of things? Well, this is really basic, and this is no different to what you do with valuables that you may already own. Jewelry, could be precious metals, any sort of documents or anything like that, or cash for that matter, where if you've got a safe, that is a great place to be storing things like that. Once again, it's not the be all and end all, and most of the times if someone's really, really determined, they'll drag your safe out of your home and take it somewhere where they can go to work on it. But it's more about protecting, just making it as hard as you possibly can for most circumstances. And if someone comes across, they break into your house, they're in a rush, they're trying to just get what they can, they come across a big chunky safe that it's going to take a bit of work for them and make a bit of noise for them to try and get access to it, then they're less likely to try and get into it. So just that extra layer of protection. If you want to take it to the next level, so let's say you're storing a seed phrase for, and that seed phrase contains a lot of Bitcoin or assets on it. It's got a lot of dollar value stored on it, or it could be for something like a company or something like that. Then you may like to look at like bank safe type arrangements or vaulting type arrangements, where you may choose to put your seed phrase into one of those really high-end secure places, a secure environment. Now, obviously, that comes at a cost. You've got to then pay for those services, but you may already have them from holding some gold or something like that. So if that's the case, then you can put your seed phrase into somewhere nice and safe like that. Once again, physical theft, if you leave it laying around, it's going to get stolen more than likely. Okay, so just make sure it's out of plain sight. So don't tell everyone where you're leaving it or what you've got or why you've got it. You wouldn't tell anyone where you keep all your cash or your precious metals. So treat it the same. Like, treat it with care and treat it like it is. It is the keys to your bank account, because that's essentially what it is. And once again, if you're talking to people, you might say, oh yeah, do a little bit of Bitcoin, a whole little bit of Bitcoin or something like that. But if you say, oh, I've got 500 Bitcoin stored on my hardware device, then the chances are you're painting that target on your back again. So just be sensible and do the things you would normally do with physical assets to secure them in your home or office environment. Okay, it's pretty simple stuff, that side of things. All right, let's keep rolling on. All right, so this next one, this has happened, and look, I'm sure as we get more Bitcoin millionaires, this will become more prominent, and that's what we call a physical harm attack, or the $5 wrench attack. So you can have the best security, the best passwords in the world, but if someone comes up to you with a $5 wrench and starts wailing into you until you give up that information, pretty hard to protect against things like that. So how can we protect our seed phrases from things like that? So if someone's going to come up and physically harm you and force you to give up your seed phrase, so they force you to go to your safe and open the safe and get out the seed phrase. Okay, not much you can do about that. However, what we can do is make it so that that sort of attack is harder and doesn't yield the results people might think they're going to get. So how do we do that? We use things called passphrases. So this is another layer over the top of our 12-word seed phrase, where we put essentially another password over the top of that seed phrase. And that way, if someone does get your seed phrase and they input that into a hardware wallet or some other software wallet and try to see your balances, they can see what would be on the default seed phrase. But if you've got sections protected by passphrases, then they can't see what assets are stored in the areas protected by the passphrase. And you could have multiple passphrases. So you could have a honeypot passphrase where, or a burner one, where if someone does get your seed phrase and they put it in, they go, "Oh, this has got nothing on it." And look, they'd have to be clever enough to then realize you've got a passphrase on it. You could give them have a burner seed passphrase where you give it to them, and it contains a small amount of money on it, a small amount of assets, and yeah, that's all I've got, guys. So it's what we call plausible deniability. So they're never going to know how many passphrases you have on that device. Okay, so you could have your seed phrase segmented into and protected by a number of different passphrases, which no one would ever know the total amount you've got. We can do other things like distributing our seed phrase, so using like a segmentation type approach. So if you split your 12-word seed phrase up into 3 batches of 8 and distributed that to trusted places or people, the only way that seed phrase could be reconstructed is by bringing 2 pieces of that together. So 2 lots of the 8 words to form the full 12 words. So in that instance, even if someone does physically harm you and get hold of one bank of those 8 words, they then have to go and try and locate where the other 2 portions are so they can retrieve one. Okay, so you're basically distributing geographically, you're distributing where these words are stored, and that means that the physical harm attack is rendered a lot harder, because it's not just one person or one place they need to be at, they've got to be at multiple places at the same time to retrieve it all. And then there's the more advanced version of that, which is employing something called smear backup. So it's essentially a group of seed words that you can design in such a way that you need multiple people to come together and bring their seed words together to restore the wallet. And that goes beyond just splitting up into a bank of 3. You can have that up into 16 slices, and you need 4 people from this group and 3 people from this group and 5 people from this group, all to come together to reconstruct the entire seed phrase. So you can get quite technical in the way you use smear backups, so that you can distribute over a number of different groups and different family members or different acquaintances, so that they don't necessarily need to know who the other party is or even trust the other party. But when you bring together the right people in the right amounts, so the right amount of account holders, you can restore this seed phrase. So that works really well across companies and things like that. So that is a a good way to prevent against this physical harm, or even against just within a company, prevent one rogue actor from spending all the company's assets. So you need multiple people to be able to approve transactions and the like. So that is a whole session in on itself, and we'll do a video on Schmear backup, because I think that's worth understanding if you're dealing with reasonable sums of money. Once again, don't talk about how much Bitcoin or other assets you own. Doing that just invites people to get curious and maybe start to think about what they could possibly get if they did a physical harm attack. So if you paint a big target on your back, I don't like to say you're asking for it, but you're definitely making yourself more attractive in terms of if someone is going to go and do these sorts of attacks. And I don't know why companies do this. So you order your Trezor device or your Ledger, and they give you bumper stickers in the pack. So what are you going to do with this bumper sticker? Stick it on your laptop, stick it on your car, stick it on your house window? What? I just don't see the sense in having those bumper stickers. Why would you want to advertise that you've got a Trezor device where you're storing all these digital assets? It's just dumb. Don't do it. Don't go sticking the stickers everywhere. They're the first thing that go in the bin when I order one of those devices. Is I get rid of all of that sort of information where it's advertising that I've got one of these devices. It just seems crazy. Likewise, when like I mentioned in the first slide, when you're writing your seed phrase down, it's always handy to write it on something blank. So it's great that Trezor and Ledger, they give you these cards where they've got the 12 boxes on there, and you can write all your seed phrase in there, but then they've got plastered over it, Trezor this, Trezor that, go to this website. Like, why? You don't need that information. Just keep it clear, uncluttered, shouldn't have any identifying information that says what the seed phrase is for, as long as it's got enough for you to be able to do what you need to do. Okay, so just don't advertise the fact that you got these things. All right, and we're nearly through all of this. Let's keep going, but I think we're doing really well. We're learning a lot of do's and don'ts about how we should treat our passphrases and protect ourselves, our seed phrases, sorry. And the last one that we're going to have a look at, as you can tell, is more from physical destruction. Okay, so what can we do to prevent? It's great that we've written down our seed phrase and we're doing all right things online, but look, things happen. Houses burn down, things get destroyed, floods, you name it. So what can we do to protect against that? And a few of the things that we've already done will also help mitigate against a lot of these risks from physical destruction as well. So we've already mentioned that we might like to store our seed in a safe. Okay, well, what if that's a fireproof safe? Even better. Or what if you've got a fireproof sachet? So a little slip that you can put your seed phrase into and close it up so that it's got some fire protection around it. Most importantly, make the redundant copies and store them in separate locations. So we've already said this as the 101. Write it down more than once. Put it in safe locations in separate, geographically different areas. That way, if there is a fire, flood, whatever, you've got something sitting somewhere else where you can, it's safe and sound, and you know you can sleep at night if one of those copies got destroyed. Another good thing is store it on a metal seed plate. So there's a number of different companies and devices out there where you can imprint your seed phrase onto a bit of metal, or use little tags that you can form your seed phrase up and lock it away so that physically it's protected. And usually these are stainless steel, so that's important. So they've got really good resistance from high temperatures like fires, corrosion, so water damage, things like that. So they're probably one of the better devices and materials you can store your seed on to protect against physical destruction. So store it in waterproof material. So that's like we said, even if it's just as simple as laminating something, at least it's better than writing it on a folded up scrap of paper. We've already talked about distributing your seed phrase using segmentation. So if you split up your seed phrase and you put it in with trusted parties in safe locations, it can give you that geographic separation that you need. So if one slice of this seed phrase goes missing, you've got the others to help reconstruct it. So you'll see a lot of the things we do, they carry across to protect against not just one form of risk, but multiple forms of risk. And once again, we talked about the smear backups. So that is another way where you can geographically separate the seed phrase, put it in different locations, so that if one of those locations is destroyed, the other parts of that smear backup can come together and reform the seed phrase. A couple of don'ts, pretty simple. If you write it down on a screwed up ball of paper and it's kicking around your office, then look, you're probably going to lose it, or it's going to get folded and crumpled and torn or something like that. So write it on something sturdy, a bit of cardboard, and if you can laminate it, even better. Don't write it on something that will decay over time. So what do I mean by that? And you've probably all come across this. Thermal printers, I think they're the worst invention ever. You go buy something from a department store, they print out a thermal receipt. 3 months later, when something goes wrong with that device, you need to pull out the receipt to get a refund or replacement. The information is just gone on it. So it's the thermal type papers and things like that. They just don't last, and the information, it decays over time. So if you're going, or same, there might be a particular text or pen or something you're using that will fade and decay over time. So make sure whatever it is you're writing it down on, it's permanent. It's not going to get rubbed off or something silly like that. And if it's on a nice thick bit of card and it's laminated, even better. If you can get it on steel plate, way to go. That's a really good thing to do. All right, so look, we've gone through and we've covered all the main things, the primary things that we are likely to have issues with. So in summary, so treat your seed phrase as you would your online bank account details. So if you wouldn't go give someone your username and your password to your internet banking, you keep that very close because it's got your funds on there. Seed phrase is exactly the same. It's access to all your funds. Once again, this protects against lots of different things, so make sure you have multiple copies stored in a safe place. So multiple copies spread around the place so that it protects against theft, physical destruction, things like that. So you're protecting against as many things as you can by implementing the strategy you choose. And only ever leave seed phrases with trusted parties. So people you absolutely would have no hesitation that they're going to do the right thing by you. Okay, so if there's any seed of doubt there, excuse the pun, then make sure that you're not leaving this sort of sensitive information with people that you don't really trust. Most important thing is test your seed phrase works now before you need to restore it in a real scenario. So where there's a fire or a theft or something like that. Test it now, restore your device, make sure it all works, because you don't want to have this device loaded up with a heap of funds and that's when you find out that your seed phrase wasn't written down correctly. Okay, so when you first set the device up, test it. Yeah, it's a bit of messing around and no one likes to do these sorts of things, but do it now, because when the time comes when you need to restore it, you'll have confidence that you've got it written down correctly and that it works. All right, that's it for this video. I hope that's been useful and I hope it's given you a bit of a gauge on how you can protect your seed phrase a little bit more and make sure that your funds are safe for many years to come. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.